What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 32 deadline. And remember that it is a Friday deadline this week, so by the time this video goes live, there won't be that much longer to lock in your teams. It's 6:30 PM UK time, and because of that, I can't wait for all the press conferences to finish before I record this video. So if there's anything major that I missed from them, we'll obviously cover it in the deadline stream later. So let's start off by talking about the announcement from yesterday, and that is that double Game Week 36 is confirmed. We are still waiting for some of the fixtures that need to be rearranged to be announced, but they're pretty much all going to go into Game Week 37 now. So it's kind of what we've expected, but just to kind of officially confirm it, Newcastle in Game Week 36 will play Leeds away and Brighton at home, and Brighton will play Arsenal away and Newcastle away. Now, I don't think this is going to affect too many people's transfer plans this week because Brighton aren't playing, and we've known for a while they've got a lot of double game weeks to come from Game Week 33 onwards. Newcastle do have a fixture, but it's Spurs at home, so most people are not going to go out of their way to get players from either of these teams, but it might affect your transfers kind of later on. So if you want to get a few more players for 32 and you're not free hitting and you're thinking about taking out Brighton players, I'd be very careful about doing that unless you kind of want to switch around the ones you have. So let's say you take out Dunk to get in an Arsenal or a Liverpool defender, and then later on you do that because you want to bring in an extra Brighton attacker instead, then fair enough. But just be careful about how many transfers that's using. The double for Brighton itself is not great. Both Arsenal away and Newcastle away are tough fixtures, but Brighton is also one of the best attacks in the league, so I'm not really too concerned about that. And obviously that's not the only advantage they give you. There's also all those extra fixtures, other extra fixtures as well, plus the good single game weeks. With Newcastle, that's probably where your captain is coming from that week. I'm just going to quickly check. I think Haaland has got Everton away that week. Yeah, Everton away. So you could look at him as well, but personally I'll be going for a double game week captain. Potentially Trippier, even though they haven't kept a huge amount of clean sheets recently. The other one that a lot of people are going to look at is Isak. So I guess when you're making your plans, if he's someone you want to bring in, just make sure you've got a spare transfer or the cash to do that. I know for me, my rough plan is to do Watkins to Isak in Game Week 36. And I know it sounds very crazy right now to drop Watkins, but that's probably going to be my only way to do it. And I don't have to worry about it for a few more weeks. So double Game Week 36 confirmed. Let's move on to the Game Week 32 topics. So as with a lot of the videos I've done this week, most of the questions that came in were about the free hit. So I think that shows the sheer volume of people that are activating the chip this week. There were some non-free hit questions, but a lot of them revolved around wildcard for Game Week 33. And I don't really want to cover that in Game Week 32 content. So I'll try and do it next week, even though the turnaround is pretty quick. So let's get into the questions. Is Kane being overlooked on free hit? He always finds a way to get points. I always try and frame it as, is he being overlooked for the right reasons? And the answer to that question is probably yes. Has he been super consistent this season? Yes. Does he have a tough fixture this week? Also yes, right? Newcastle away is not easy. So can I see Kane scoring in that game? Yeah, I probably can. But is he going to get multiple returns? I would say that's probably unlikely. Now, that doesn't necessarily make him a bad option, right? If you've got the money to fill out the rest of the squad exactly how you want, and he gets 1 goal and 3 bonus points, 9 points might be a decent enough score to have him in your team. But there's lots of other strikers who could possibly match that, because even if they're not quite as good as Harry Kane, they've got a better fixture. So Solanke versus West Ham, Tony versus Villa at home, Watkins versus Brentford away. Lots of people are actually looking at Isak as well for Spurs at home, Jesus against Southampton at home as well. And I'm sure if we knew for sure that Jota or Darwin Núñez was starting for Liverpool, a lot of people would look at them as well. So it's not that Kane is a bad option. And you're right, he does always find a way to get points, but there's lots of other options people want to go for this week. And also, most of the non-free hitters will probably have Harry Kane, so it's a nice way to kind of bet against them. Also, looking at kind of a team you might put together, depending on which other players you want, when you add Harry Kane into the mix, it does add a little bit of a budget constraint, which really we haven't had for a lot of this season. Like if you think about most of our normal teams that we're going to get back after the free hit, well, there's probably like 2 Brighton attackers in there who are super cheap. So that allows us to get Haaland and Kane, and soon that will become Haaland and Salah. And we've got the rest of the players we want because we don't have loads of expensive defenders and stuff like that. But on a free hit, You kind of do. A lot of people have got Trent. A lot of people going for Salah. Saka is more than 8 million. Tony and Watkins are close to 8 million. So the budget starts to kind of get used up. And if you want to add Harry Kane into the mix, so let's say I swap him for Jesus, you've got to make a few downgrades elsewhere. Now, it might be perfectly fine, right? It might not be the end of the world what you have to do. But if I did this team, for example, well, this is Trent, Trippier, and kind of, one of the other three defenders. But if I wanted to get Robertson in there as well, alongside Trent, then suddenly it becomes a lot more difficult, right? So let's say I want to go for Robertson and double Liverpool defence, and I drop Gakpo. I've got to go for a midfielder that's 5.2 million or less. Now, obviously, there's other ways to kind of make up the budget. I can put really cheap defenders in and stuff like that, and that would allow me to get Eze. But what if you don't want Eze in that spot? What if you want a Maddison or a Bowen or someone like that? Suddenly, to also have the double Liverpool defence and Kane, the budget becomes a bit of a struggle. So he might well be worthwhile putting in. But if you genuinely want the other players, like let's say you want to go for a Bowen punt and you want to keep Robertson, then to me, looking at that squad, there's no way I want to downgrade Saka or Salah, so it has to be Harry Kane. You can pretty much get any other striker. So I think he is a good option. I will say, I think people are underestimating him. I think people have almost wrote him off as though he's not this good. He's not a good option. He is. I just think there's plenty of other good options, and it's not the worst week to kind of go against him. I probably will not have him in my team for what it's worth. So with West Ham's recent form, is it worthwhile considering Bowen over Maddison? And I would say absolutely. Bowen's an all-round solid pick this week. He's facing a Bournemouth side that you'd always expect to concede at least 1 or 2 goals, if not more. And if they do that, hopefully Bowen will be involved. West Ham scored 4 goals in Europe last night, 2 goals in their last league match against Arsenal too. So they are attacking well. I will say with the form thing, it is quite a small sample, right? It wasn't that long ago that West Ham were getting smashed 5-1 by Newcastle. I think you can quite easily create a narrative, right? Bowen looks better because West Ham are in form, Leicester completely out of form, but you could turn around and say, well, hang on, we got some new manager bounce potentially with Leicester, even though it's Dean Smith. And I know what you're thinking, why didn't that happen in the last game? Well, that was Man City away. That's a very tough game. Wolves at home is a little bit easier. Maybe this is the week where Maddison is due some of those points. He has been a little bit unlucky the last few weeks, and ultimately West Ham have just played a game in Europe, so maybe they'll be tired, right? And that is how easy it is to create a narrative. But generally, I think Bowen is a solid pick. But if you're looking for me to kind of sit here and say he's absolutely miles better than Maddison, I don't think that's the case. And I actually think in some ways it gets a little bit easy. It's not that easy, but it gets a little bit easier on free hit when you just accept that you cannot have everyone and that there are lots of close calls this week. And the pick you should make is probably the one that makes you a little bit happier about your team. So if you think about how most people's free hit squads are set up, a lot of them have got Salah, Saka and Martinelli. So if you're playing a 3-4-3, you've only got space for one more midfielder. Even if you're playing 3-5-2, it's 2 midfielders. And if I look at all the teams that are playing this week, with players you might want to select on free hit in midfield that I haven't already mentioned, you've got Odegaard at Arsenal, maybe Willian or Andreas at Fulham. You've got Eze or Elise at Crystal Palace. You've got Maddison, obviously, at Leicester. Gakpo at Liverpool. Bowen at West Ham. Maybe Ben Rama if you think he's going to start because he's the penalty taker. And maybe even Son as an outside bet for Spurs. So you've got 10 midfielders I've just kind of reeled off there. Most of them are pretty good options this week. And could I guess which one's definitely going to score the most points? No, it's all round pretty close. So if you think that Bowen is now better than Maddison, and they are the two that you're choosing from, just go for Bowen. It's not like Maddison is up here and Bowen's down here, or vice versa. They're both just pretty good picks. And I know a lot of people don't like Leicester right now. Fair enough. Don't include Maddison. But I don't think Bowen is miles ahead of him or anything like that. But he is, like I said, an all-round solid pick. Due to no Saliba and uncertain minutes on Jesus, are we better off just going for 3 Arsenal midfielders? Is there any argument for just going 2 Arsenal total? Just on that last point, first of all, I don't think there really is much of an argument outside of the fact that most people who free hit this week are probably going to have 3 Arsenal players, and you might want to do something a little bit different by having 2 or fewer. Outside of that, I think most people should be looking at 3 Arsenal players. Like if I think about the best best 11 picks on a free hit this week, it always includes 3 from Liverpool and 3 from Arsenal. It's just up to each of us individually to determine what the best combination is from those teams. So I wouldn't be doing it. Even if you had only space for 2 Arsenal attackers, I would pick an Arsenal defender, right? After Liverpool against Nottingham Forest at home, I think Arsenal against Southampton at home, even without Saliba and maybe without Zinchenko, is still better than pretty much every other defender pick this week. How much have we gone round in circles on a Fulham defender, Alex Moreno, a second Crystal Palace defender, a Leicester defender, maybe a West Ham defender against Bournemouth, a second Newcastle defender? None of them are that inspiring. And even if you think someone like Moreno is going to get you an attacking return, I personally think that Brentford are going to score in that game, so he's not going to get a clean sheet. So even without Saliba and a weaker Arsenal defence, I still think Ben White, Gabriel or Tierney, if he obviously plays ahead of Zinchenko, are better than pretty much every other defender I've just mentioned. So I'm not going to go into this deadline without 3 Arsenal players, that's for sure. Just on Jesus, I don't know, uncertainty on minutes, I'm not really worried about his start, because if you look at his recent games, obviously he was building up fitness against Fulham and Palace, and then he started the last 3 games, got above 60 minutes in 2 of them, and just hit 59 against Leeds. There are obviously slight concerns in my mind, because the next game after Southampton on Friday is Man City away. That's a huge game. Jesus is definitely going to start that game, so Arteta will have that in the back of his mind. But it is a Friday to Wednesday turnaround after just playing on, when did they play last week? Sunday, I think it was. Yeah, Sunday. So Sunday, Friday, Wednesday, right? They should be capable of doing that. But obviously, with Arsenal right now, they have got players that can come in for him, like Nketiah and like Trossard. And Trossard is the one that keeps subbing on for him. And I think what Arteta said in his press conference yesterday has got people slightly worried. So he was asked whether Jesus is ready to play the full 90 minutes. He said, "We'll see. We've been really careful. There have been some issues within that period when he was doing the final stages of the rehab, and we have to be really attentive." So that doesn't sound like there's issues now. It just sounds like there were issues when he was trying to get back to being able to play. But maybe I'm reading that wrong. We have players that can change the game, that are fully fit, that deserve to play as well, and we have to be mindful of that. So that doesn't really strike me as Jesus getting benched, but it does tell you that, and you don't even need him to tell you, right? We've seen it over the last few games. Trossard and players like Nketiah are going to continue to come on. And if it's a choice between leaving Jesus on and risking another injury, or getting him off after the 70th minute and bringing Trossard on, then it looks like Arteta is going to continue to bring him off. So I'd be very surprised if Jesus plays 90 minutes against Southampton, especially when they've got Man City away coming up on Wednesday. So I don't think that's going to happen. But if he does get 60 plus minutes, I think he's a really great option. There are a lot of forwards this week, like Solanke, Tony, Watkins and Kane in particular, that are pretty much nailed on for close to 90 minutes with penalties. So you could make an argument to go for 3 other Arsenal players instead. But one of the reasons I'm very tempted to go for Jesus is a lot of non-free hitters are not going to buy him. So he's a way to go different without going different for the sake of it. Like he's a quality option, but his ownership's going to be quite low. So that's why I quite like him. But just on the last kind of thing I haven't talked about from the question, 3 Arsenal midfielders is good as well. Saka, Martinelli I love. And if you want to go for Odegaard, there's nothing wrong with him whatsoever. He does quite often get subbed, right? I know that as an owner, but he does get pretty good minutes. I don't own him this week, but let me just find him here. He's in my actual team. You can see 89 against West Ham, 79 against Liverpool, 84 against Leeds. Loads of 90 minutes before that, though, right? The previous 4 games. So minutes-wise, Odegaard is pretty much locked in for decent ones, and obviously he's definitely going to start as well. So you could go for that triple up, and it just really comes down to combinations. I'm telling you now, this is how every free hit goes. For most of us, 6 to 8 players will be locked in. We're just going round and round in circles on different combinations for about 3 to 4 players. So for me, for example, right, if I just bring my current free hit squad back up, Jesus, Gakpo, and look, ignore Castagna, it could be any third defender. I quite like the look of that because Jesus and Gakpo are going to be fairly low owned. But is it better to go for, say, a Robertson here, right? Ditch Gakpo, and instead of going for like Bowen, Maddison, Eze or someone like that, just get Odegaard in, right? Because that's a great fixture for Arsenal. And then just remove Jesus, for someone like Isak or Solanke, who you know is just an all-round solid pick. Now, don't get me wrong, Robertson, Odegaard and Solanke on a free hit is very boring compared to a third defender, Gakpo and Jesus. But if we're looking for minutes, I'm getting much more probably from those three players than I am the former three, and then I've just got to hope things go my way. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Lots of the last minute decisions we've got are all going to be close calls, and it could go one way or the other, right? It's just something that can happen in FPL. So I don't think Jesus is a must-have, but I think there's a lot of good reasons to include him. And would I go for just 2 Arsenal total? Not going to happen, I don't think. So do you need to be differential on free hit, or is free hit differential enough? My general stance is it's just enough to be on a free hit. You don't have to worry about doing things completely crazy or anything like that. If you think about how most non-free hit teams are going to look, if they want to get close to an 11 like a free hitter will have, that means they can only have 4 players on the bench from Brighton, Man City and Man United, who we all know have got pretty good fixtures coming up and double game weeks as well. Now of course, some people that don't free hit this week will save it for game week 34, but there's going to be a lot of people out there that have already used it, and so they've got to make a sacrifice somewhere. Either their team will be a little bit weaker this week, or they're going to have to make a bunch of transfers over the next few weeks to make it stronger for the future doubles, where obviously those of us that are free hitting this week are going to get our teams back that are hopefully somewhat prepared for those double game weeks. So there's that element. Also, a lot of people not free hitting have probably got things like double Newcastle defence against Harry Kane up front, and unless they've sold Kane to a 4 players like maybe Salah, for example, that's not necessarily ideal. Obviously, as I explained on the Game Week preview video, it's absolutely possible for a Newcastle defender to score and Harry Kane to score, and for both to get a decent, FPL points total. But ultimately, it's not an ideal situation. Some might have sold one of their Arsenal players recently to get a double game weeker in, so then there's that choice about having to get them back, etc. Whereas we can easily get 3 Arsenal. Some people, or a lot of people, will have bought Salah back at this point, so he's not going to be a differential. Maybe a few less have bought Trent. Very few people are going to have triple Liverpool that aren't on the free hit. So I think it's differential enough. I don't get too sucked into my free hit also having to be different to other people as well. So like if I decide to do that move I just spoke about, going Robertson, Odegaard and Solanke, yes, it's boring, but I don't care that it's not differential enough on a free hit, right? The thing with free hit to remember is it's about your points total overall. Yes, we want to get a huge score this week, but it's also what it's allowed you to do before 32 and after 32 as well. So I mean, ultimately, FPL is very simple, right? Just pick the best 11 players that you think are going to score the most points, and that should be all there is to it. The only thing to decide is if you're genuinely stuck on 2 players, which you think are really, really close, right, and you're not sure which one to go for, you either take the one with the higher ownership because you want to play it safer, or you take the one with the lower ownership because you want to go a little bit more differential. And either way is fine, depending on what kind of FPL manager you are. That's the only deciding factor. Otherwise, like I said, just pick the 11 players. And if they're all, in lots of people's eyes, boring, who cares? That probably means they're going to get a bunch of points. All right, so would I pick Solanke or Isak as my third forward? And I'm going to be honest with you, I've had a little bit of difficulty answering this question. I'm looking at all the recordings I've done on my other screen. I think this is about the 20th take. And I even considered taking this question out of the video because I think it's quite close. And I think my answer is going to be Solanke. But the 2 reasons I would use for that are not really logical. So if you ask me if I think Isak is going to start, my answer would be yes. But there's a small doubt in the back of my mind saying kind of, what if this is the week where Wilson starts ahead of Isak and Eddie Howe decides not to play both of them together, therefore Isak is benched. Now, if you look at his recent minutes, he started, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the last 6. And the only game he didn't start was when there was a quick turnaround in the double in game week 29. So presumably, until there's another double in game week 36 where we have to think about this again, he's probably going to start most of the fixtures. I guess the true test will be the midweek turnaround of Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. Does he miss one of these games? Possibly. But is it going to be the Spurs game? Probably not. But I cannot get rid of that doubt in the back of my mind. The other thing is, which again is not really that logical, is the fixture. Now, do I think Newcastle are going to go and beat Spurs, given how well they've played at home this this season, obviously got a few doubts about Spurs themselves, I do think Newcastle are going to win. And to do that, they're of course going to have to score some goals if that wasn't obvious enough. And if Isak's going to be on the pitch, he's probably going to be involved. So he should be a good option. But I still can't, my brain still won't quite let me say that Spurs at home isn't a bad fixture for Newcastle. There's still part of my brain that is thinking that's not as great a fixture as it looks. And if Spurs did manage to keep the score down, would I be that surprised? I probably wouldn't. Like, I don't think Newcastle are going to go and win like 3 or 4-0. It's probably more likely to be like a 2-1. But again, Isak could be involved in the goal. So like I said, I'm choosing Solanke, but there's not really any logic to it. And like with Solanke, you know he's going to start. I also think West Ham, as well as they've played the last few games, they're still conceding goals. I think Bournemouth are attacking pretty well, so they can definitely score. So it's not like it's all just bad things with Isak. There's also some upside with Solanke as well. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think they're both good. I think they're both pretty good options, and that's probably all I can say on it. If you prefer Isak, go for him. I've not even seen him in that many teams either. So if you're looking to do something a bit different, but also going for a solid pick, maybe put Isak in your team. I've seen a lot of good managers going for it. But I think I would pick Solanke, but I don't think my reasons for doing so are necessarily that good. It's maybe just previous biases that I can't get rid of, even though I think Isak's going to start and Newcastle's going to win the game. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Maybe I should just go for Isak. Anyway, I'll leave you on that great analysis. This is why you keep coming back to this channel. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already, because there'll be loads of other nonsense for the rest of the season and into next season as well. If you enjoyed that video, give it a like. Leave me a comment below. Isak or Solanke? Which one are you picking? Otherwise, I'll leave that video. I can't talk anymore. Why do I do these things? Why am I leaving this in? This is what happens when I record these videos. That's why there's 20 takes, because I keep messing up. And I've messed up here, but I don't want to do a 21st take, so I'm just going to leave it there. The video's done. Deadline stream later, starting at 5 o'clock UK time. There'll be a little bit of last minute panic, I'm sure. Am I going to get last minute info? I don't know. Don't rely on it. See you later.